Okay, so today we're going to take a deep dive into something super interesting.
Yeah.
It's a deep dive into the potential economic landscape
Yeah, okay.
under a Trump presidency.
All right.
And I got to say, you've given me a really interesting mix of sources here.
Well, yeah,
We've got everything from potential tax cuts and what that might mean for the stock market, trade wars and how that could affect everyday products, and then you threw in energy.
Yeah.
Fossil fuels versus renewables. So,
That's a big one.
yeah, it's going to be a wild ride. So buckle up. Let's get into it.
Absolutely. I'm ready.
Okay, so one of the first things that jumped out at me from these articles is the potential impact of Trump's proposed corporate tax cuts.
Right.
One of the sources even goes so far as to say that these cuts could have fueled a massive stock market rally.
Mm-hmm.
And it specifically mentions manufacturing and tech as sectors that might have seen the biggest gains. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's certainly possible that we would have seen at least a short-term bump in the stock market, especially in those industries that you mentioned.
Right.
But there's a flip side to this whole tax cut thing,
Right.
and that's the deficit spending.
Right.
The article acknowledges that these tax cuts would have significantly reduced government revenue,
Uh-huh.
and that would likely mean more borrowing and possibly a weaker U.S. dollar.
Oh, so you're saying like if the dollar weakens, imports become more expensive,
Exactly.
and then prices go up on everything.
Yeah, that's inflation, and it hits everyone, from the price of gas all the way to your groceries.
Wow, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a stock market boom,
Right.
but yeah, we really have to consider those long-term consequences.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on to another hot topic, trade, and specifically Trump's idea of renegotiating deals with China.
Uh-huh.
One of your sources uses this phrase, trade war.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, that sounds kind of scary.
It can be.
So can you break it down for us? Like, what would that have looked like for everyday people?
Well, basically, the source talks about Trump's plan to put tariffs on stuff we import from China. Like electronics, textiles, things like that.
So that means like our phones, our clothes, maybe even furniture could get more expensive.
Yeah, that's the idea. It's supposed to protect American businesses from foreign competition, but you always run the risk of other countries fighting back,
Right.
Like, remember what happened back in the 1930s with the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act?
Oh, yeah. That was supposed to help American farmers, right?
Exactly. But it backfired big time. Other countries slapped on their own tariffs, and it actually made the Great Depression worse.
Wow. So it's kind of a risky move.
It can be. Yeah, it's a delicate balance.
Okay, so we've talked about potential stock market rallies and the possibility of a modern-day trade war.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's switch gears and talk about energy.
All right.
Trump was really big on fossil fuels, and one of these sources takes a deep dive into what that could have meant for renewable energy.
Yeah.
What were some of the key takeaways for you from that article?
Well, it suggests that focusing so heavily on oil and gas might have given us some short-term economic benefits.
Okay.
But it also could have slowed down the move towards renewables.
Interesting. So like we might have fallen behind other countries in the race for clean energy?
Exactly. And think about it. We could have missed out on all those opportunities to create new jobs and develop new technologies in that sector.
That's a really good point.
Plus, it might have strained our relationships with some of our allies in Europe and Asia who are already investing a lot in renewables.
Right. They're kind of leading the way on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a minute and look at the big picture.
Okay.
We talked about tax cuts, maybe leading to a market boom, but also potentially causing inflation.
Right.
Then there's the whole trade war thing with all those unpredictable consequences for consumers.
Yeah.
And then this whole energy landscape where we might have prioritized short-term gains from fossil fuels over long-term progress in renewables. It really makes you wonder what the global economy is going to look like in 5-10 years.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Is.
These policies are so complex, it's really hard to predict what the long-term effects will be.
For sure.
But one thing is, certain economics is constantly changing, and everything we do can have a ripple effect.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. This has been a really thought-provoking deep dive. Thanks for walking us through all this.
My pleasure.
It's just fascinating to think about the complexities of these policies and their potential long-term impact.
Definitely something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thanks again for joining us for this deep dive.
Anytime.
And for everyone listening, remember, stay curious,
Always.
and we'll see you next time.
See ya. Bye. Bye.